For more than 100 years, scientists in BC have been researching salmon. The databanks are filled with information about spawning, spawning grounds, and the forces that affect the environment where salmon return after their journey out to sea. Researchers know the impact of freshwater and nearshore factors on survival rates of smolts that are setting up for their journey out into the Pacific Ocean. Things like phytoplankton and zooplankton, which are the food base when in abundance, allow salmon smolts to fatten up and mature in advance of the long journey that's ahead of them. Then there are the predators: seals, sea lions, orcas, and blue herons, to name but a few, that rely on salmon as the staple of their diet. Add in algae blooms, and it's a wonder any salmon survive. What scientists now know is that of the millions of eggs that are fertilized, the survival rate has dropped from, on average, about 4% 100 years ago to just 1% today. What those same scientists still don't know is what are the factors that ensure or compromise the salmon's survivability during their first winter at sea. Well, that's about to change. 19 scientists from 5 Pacific Rim countries are heading into the Gulf of Alaska to start work on a project that may finally shed light on the factors that support or hinder the lives of salmon. We invited marine scientist Dr. Richard Beamish to join us for a conversation that matters about the next step forward in understanding where our beloved salmon go and what we can do to help ensure their survival.
Conversations That Matter is a partner program for the Center for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Welcome.
Nice to be here. A little hard to find, but it was nice to be here.
Well, the other thing that's a little hard to find is, or find out about, is what's happening to our salmon when they leave coastal waters and head out into the ocean. What is your expedition that you're about to launch? What is the expedition and what's its purpose?
Okay, well, absolutely. What you just said is really the key to understanding how we're going to manage salmon in a future of changing ecosystems. So exactly what you said.
Let's talk about your expedition. What is it? Okay. Like, how did it come together and who's involved and what's your objective?
Okay, it's a bit of a story. I'll shorten it as much as I can.
Okay.
I like to say that after 100 years of research all around the Pacific, we know a lot about Pacific salmon, but what we need to know most, we mostly don't know. And what I mean by that is that we don't understand the fundamental mechanisms that regulate Pacific salmon.
Even after 100 years of study.
That's what I say, right? And I'll explain that. A person named Brian Riddle, who's the executive director of the Salmon Foundation and a colleague and friend. Mm-hmm. And a number of years ago, I don't know, 10 or so years ago, he and I talked to all of the scientists around the Pacific, and we wrote a report identifying the science that we were doing, what we needed to do in terms of the science, and the monitoring that needed to be done. And at the end of the report, I stuck in a little paragraph that said we needed an international year of the salmon. And what that meant was that the fastest way that we were going to understand what regulates salmon abundance was if we worked together as international teams. So the International Year of the Salmon has now been announced. But what was not part of the International Year of the Salmon was an integrated study to take a look at what regulates salmon, and that's what this expedition is. And so I decided to raise $1.1 million, charter a Russian ship, put on a team of international scientists from the 5 salmon-producing countries, and we would make discoveries that would at least begin to identify the fundamental mechanisms that regulate salmon abundance. We know there are a number of studies that look at let's call it the ocean ecology of salmon. And those studies have produced lots of information. but we still don't understand the fundamental mechanisms that regulate abundance. For Chinook salmon, which is a major species that everyone's interested, if 4% of Chinook salmon that enter the ocean from rivers, if they survive, that's good. People are happy.
With 4%.
With 4%. Hatcheries will be happy. 4%, 4 or 5% survival of Chinook salmon is what happened 50, 60, 5,000 years ago.
And the seas were teeming with
Absolutely. So 4 or 5% is good. And my point is that the 95% that died, we sort of had some ideas what might be causing it. We came up with predation or something, but we really didn't understand. So we go from 95% mortality and 5% survival to 99% mortality and 1%. And right now, even 1% survival of Chinook salmon is good. So the expedition is an attempt to identify those fundamental mechanisms that regulate the abundance of salmon.
Just got to get you to hang on for a second while we take a quick commercial break.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program.
So are you going to be building on the work that has been done in understanding what happens in coastal waters? Because we know that when the salmon come down the river and they're young, they hang out in the eel grass as they acclimatize to the ocean. They fatten up a bit and away they go. But we know that part, don't we?
Yes,
and
that's been the focus of our research for the last 50 years.
Right. It's what happens afterwards.
Next, exactly. And that's what this does.
Yeah.
This, for the first time, this is the first comprehensive study of the ocean ecology of of all species of salmon in the Gulf of Alaska in the winter. And we kind of believe that 1/3 of all salmon in the Pacific rear in the Gulf of Alaska in the winter. The salmon that survived to the first ocean winter are largely the salmon that will survive to become either caught in a fishery, eaten by predators, or returned to spawn. This is a follow-up.
Yeah.
This is the next step in the science that we've been doing in coastal waters.
Mm-hmm. So Chinook, which you pointed out, is the species that so many people were paying attention to because so many other species like to eat them, and their survival is predicated on the abundance of Chinook. Chinook don't spawn just in British Columbia. They're, of course, in Washington, Oregon, into California, and you're saying that the majority of them, we believe, make their way north into the Gulf of Alaska.
Okay, well, see, I said that. But theoretically, we don't know that. We have ideas about what Chinook do. There is a lady named Laurie Whitecamp who is on this expedition, a tremendous scientist, and she has looked at where Chinook are caught in the ocean, and she has good evidence that shows that some populations of Chinook actually home to specific rearing areas in the ocean. That Chinook just don't go out into the ocean and then swim around and find food, but that's just some evidence. But we also know that Chinook are caught in fisheries in Alaska from British Columbia. Mm-hmm. We really don't know where Chinook go after they leave the coastal waters, and we will find out for the first time where they are in the Gulf of Alaska.
Okay, but that's a big ocean, and you're going to be one ship. How are you going to start to be able to figure this out through one expedition? Or is this going to have to be a multi-year commitment?
Exactly. But you have to do something to demonstrate that you need to do this again. One of the individuals and companies that's providing funds for this expedition said that he would donate $100,000 on the condition that we did it more than once. And I said, Absolutely, and my next request is going to be a lot more money.
Because you're hoping that when you come back with the results, it's going to be encouraging and it will beg the question.
I guarantee we will make discoveries that will change how we think about doing salmon research. For example, we now can do genetically based stock identification. Because we have a Russian ship, and this Russian ship for 2 decades has been making abundance estimates off the east coast of Russia. Mm-hmm. They use those abundance estimates as forecasts for their returns. So the Russians are pretty good at forecasting what's going to come back. We are going to use their same technology along with our DNA identifications at the stock or population level, and we will have population-specific abundance estimates as well as where the populations are rearing in the Gulf of Alaska for the first time.
Okay, so who are the 5 nations that you've got involved?
We have 1 scientist from Korea, 1 from Japan, 8 from Russia, 3 from the United States, and whatever's left over for Canada, I think 6.
So you're going to be packed on this ship.
The ship is full.
Yeah.
In the original agreement I had with the organization, which is called TINRO out of Vladivostok, they gave me 17 scientists, and they asked me how many Russians would be in the 17. And I said, I made it up, 7, and they agreed to that. And then as things developed, we needed 19. Mm-hmm. So just a few weeks ago, they agreed to 19. We have to move some people around a bit, but we now have 19. We actually end up having 20 scientists. The ship is absolutely full.
This is our second commercial break. We'll be back in a sec.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program.
Why do you need 20 scientists?
Well,
what are and I'm guessing that they all have different specialties. What is it that you're hoping?
Okay, first of all, this is an international expedition. It's part of the International Year of the Salmon. Actually, it's a signature event of International Year of the Salmon.
You organized.
Privately organized. I don't think it could be done by a country because there's so many things that, well, for example, Russia had some issues with receiving money from the Salmon Foundation. They would accept the money from the North Pacific Unanimous Fish Commission. So you can see this is just one example of the complexities of trying to work together. So do we need that many scientists? Because we are combining studies of salmon along with oceanographic changes, we probably could have double the number of scientists. So all of them are experts at different things. Mm-hmm. And by the way, all of them have volunteered their time, and they have all agreed to make the data that they collect public.
Okay, so that raises a question in my mind. You go out and you do this as a private enterprise. How do then governing bodies review or view this research? Do they actually act upon it? Because as you pointed out, they can't do it themselves, but do they take it into consideration? Does it become part of their decision-making process?
Okay. They could do some of it themselves, okay? And based on the results that we are going to get, they will most likely initiate similar surveys that will be done nationally. But the point still is that because this is an international expedition as part of the International Year of the Salmon, mm-hmm. and because logically the discoveries that we need to make can be made faster and cheaper if you combine the intellect from all salmon-producing countries. The individual countries will continue some of that research, and I think that the results will indicate that the countries need to work together to continue these expeditions.
So you believe that it will have a positive impact on future research that will be generated by various governments, not necessarily in a coordinated.
I will bet a good bottle of wine on that.
Oh, well, I'm not going to take up that bet because I'm hoping that it's going to happen. But I hope you get a good bottle of wine out of it.
This will. This just because of the because we are making a comprehensive surveys, and we are identifying the stock-specific distributions in abundance. So we will know where Fraser River sockeye are in the Gulf of Alaska.
Wow.
And we will have an abundance estimate of the Fraser River sockeye that are coming back in 2019 and 2020. So we will make forecasts.
So is your species identification that specific that you can say that this is a salmon that came out of the Fraser River in this run for this year and versus the next year?
Absolutely.
Wow. And that's without having put a chip in.
No. That's the DNA tells us, literally hundreds and hundreds of stocks. The DNA tells us where the stock came from, or population.
Where they spawned to.
And we have a scientist who is developing for the first time a little piece of plastic, essentially, with hundreds of, let's call it, capabilities of identifying the stock on that piece of plastic, if it works. We haven't got it yet. So that instead of having to collect the tissue and taking it back to the laboratory and then determining the population, we are, for the very first time, going to try to determine the population as we collect the samples out at sea. Hasn't been developed yet, but they're working on that technology specifically for this expedition.
When do you leave port?
Everything's still being arranged. As of last night, I heard that the Russians are changing a little bit. Mm-hmm. They want to actually, we were originally going to leave, the ship was going to leave Vladivostok February the 1st, arrive in Dutch Harbor February the 14th, leave February the 15th, 25-day survey. They now are proposing to leave in mid-January from Vladivostok.
So okay.
No, they're going to do 2 weeks of surveys on over on the Western Pacific. They weren't going to do this before. So again, so this will be information that's comparable to the Gulf of Alaska, that's essentially done for free because they like the idea. This is huge that they are now spending their own money and they are collecting comparable information.
Third and final break. We'll be right back.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to...
Wow. So
last night.
Where does everybody meet to board the ship? Is it Vladivostok?
No. Some of the scientists will get on Vladivostok. Most of the scientists will, from North America, all of them will travel to Dutch Harbor, get on the vessel at Dutch Harbor. As of last night, we're pretty sure that they're going to come to Vancouver at the end of the expedition for 2 days. Mm-hmm. This will be finalized on Friday, but I'm pretty sure it will happen. And Harmac Pacific Pulp Mill in Nanaimo just gave me $25,000 to the expedition, and I said on the condition that the vessel will come to Nanaimo, although they didn't specify that. But the vessel, most likely, they will agree to this on Friday. And then that will mean 1 or 2 days in Vancouver and then 1 day in Nanaimo. And there will be a party.
This is pretty exciting.
This is huge.
So where can people find out about this? Let's say somebody says, "Okay, Dick, I really like what you're doing. I want to at least be able to follow what you're doing, or I want to support you." Is there any way that?
Okay, well, we're working on that now.
Okay.
I put myself as head of communications, and I have a lady named Chris Neville who's going to be on the ship, and we are training her to be a communications expert. And various people, Stuart Muir is helping us, and now we're in the process of becoming communications experts like yourself. But so
So you'll be posting online, you'll be sending out information as you go?
Daily, as soon as we can figure out how to do that. The ship doesn't have what I'm calling the capacity to do that right now, and I'm trying to get people to help me
With a
figure out how to
satellite
do
uplink
that.
of some
Yes,
sort,
yeah.
yeah.
And everybody's been really helpful.
This is pretty exciting. Is this the most exciting project that you've taken on in your career? Because I get the sense that, you're driven by passion here.
Yeah, probably because of the consequences. All right. Also, I'm an editor for a scientific journal. Been that editor for years. I've been trying to tell my editorial colleagues and the journal publisher, anybody that will listen, that as scientists we do a pretty good job communicating to ourselves. We do a lousy job communicating to the public. And it's hard, all right? And it's not just that some scientist has to learn to be a communicator, because most of us aren't good at it. It's that the people that employ us have to recognize that as part of your job, you need to communicate. And so if you are rewarded as a scientist for effective communications, then more people will attempt to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. There are a lot of people who I am sure are anxious to see the results of this, because they want to know what are those things that you say that affect abundance in these populations, from people through to killer whales. I think there's 5 different families of them in the Pacific: sea lions and harbor seals and anybody or any creature that is a part of this immense and complicated ecosystem. It's going to be quite extraordinary to see what you uncover and then how it informs how we move forward from here.
we will make major discoveries. That's guaranteed, okay? Now, because the information, these guys that are going out there in the winter on a Russian ship to do things that we've never done before, and there's lots of uncertainties. We don't really know where the salmon are. So we have to start fishing and see if we catch them. They have to be there somewhere, because there's hundreds of millions of them there.
Yeah.
But as we get that information and as we make it available to scientists, so you're a scientist that never goes to sea and you analyze catch data all of a sudden, and you're well-intended, you're well-recognized within your community, you now have information that you've never had before, and it was free.
Wow. Isn't that extraordinary? I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you for coming in and sharing this with us.
Thank you.